Hi there, I'm Jeremy Wayne, the Director of Regulatory Policy for Peninsula Clean Energy. I joined the agency in January of 2018, and I've been working on CCA-related regulatory policy for the last decade. I hold a master's degree in public administration focused specifically on addressing sustainability and climate change, and my career is focused on such areas. In this video, I will be providing you with a brief presentation about the department, outlining what we do, how we interact with the agency's board of directors, and highlighting some key topics that we are presently focused on. In a subsequent video, my teammates and I will provide deeper dives into key issue areas.
This presentation will cover the following items: an introduction to the team and how we interface with the rest of the agency, a brief overview of how we approach regulatory policy making, a summary of key issue areas that we cover and all of the wonderful acronyms that come with them, as well as a slightly deeper dive into 3 topic areas. I'll then get into some of the industry level challenges and opportunities that inform our policymaking. And lastly, I'll cover how we and the board interact with one another. So in addition to myself, we have Doug Karpa and Matthew Rutherford on the team. They both cover a wide range of issues before the Public Utilities Commission. And one thing I do want to highlight about our team is that we really do interface with all aspects of the agency on all the departments. And I really view our team's success as enabling the success of all the other departments of the agency. Our approach to regulatory policymaking includes demonstrating thought leadership within the industry, fostering greater collaboration between CCAs and state agencies, continuing growth and statewide access to community energy, cultivating understanding through leaderships with other key actors, establishing our agency as respected and valued within the policy forums, and pursuing opportunities to expand access to new funding sources so that our agency can do more without entirely depending upon our generation rate revenues. I also want to provide a quick overview of the different regulatory agencies that are out there and how we interact with them. Most notably, there's the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC. They directly regulate the investor-owned utilities that operate in the electricity sector, such as Pacific Gas and Electric. And as you know, our customers are also PG&E customers. PG&E provides the distribution service, the transmission of electricity to our customers, as well as the billing and metering services. So while the commission does not directly regulate us, they do indirectly regulate us through various state standards, and they do directly regulate the utilities, and quite often changes to what the utilities can and cannot do have direct repercussions on us and our operations. In addition to the CPUC, there's the California Independent System Operator, or the CAISO. Their job is to maintain grid reliability. They oversee the operations of the majority of the electricity transmission grids here in the state of California. And they are the central entity that gets to grapple with things like the summer electricity supply strain that we had last year and the potential tightening in the supply that we may see with this summer if we have another heat wave. In addition, there is the California Energy Commission. They directly regulate the publicly owned utilities or municipal utilities. They have less of a say over anything that CCAs do, but they do have a lot of control over how a lot of the state's funds are used in the electricity sector for stimulating innovation and pilot development. And so we do often interface with the CEC for grant funding and for other opportunities to, say, collaborate with state-run policies to advance shared objectives like transportation electrification. Then there's also the California Air Resources Board, or CARB. They directly regulate air pollution, including greenhouse gas emissions. They administer some of the state's fundamental programs that relate to climate change, including the cap and trade program and the low carbon fuel standard. And as I've noted here, they focus on promoting clean transportation, and they also have a focus on advancing environmental justice, since a lot of these criteria air pollutants are in disadvantaged communities. So we have quite a few different areas we cover in the regulatory arena. This is just a summary list of the various topics that we get into and their corresponding acronyms. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it gives you a spectrum of, I'd say, the most common topics that we end up engaging in and discussing with the board on. I will go over 3 of these. They're noted in bold in a little more detail, just following. But the power charge and difference adjustment is something that we will talk about frequently, as it has a very significant impact on our operations. As I noted earlier, there's a lot to do about grid reliability these days, and so the proceedings such as the Integrated Resources Plan and resource adequacy are quite busy. We're also working with the CPUC and with other agencies to really get the next leg up on advancing transportation electrification and building electrification in our service area to aid our agency's programmatic objectives. The power charge and difference adjustment, or PCIA, is what's called a non-bypassable charge. It's applied to all customers, and it's designed to recover the above market costs of legacy IOU procurement commitments. So that's a combination of commitments they've made to both conventional resources, such as nuclear and natural gas, as well as renewable resources, such as a lot of the early RPS contracts that the utilities committed to when the state first got the RPS program going. So contracts from 2009 through 2012, thereabouts. Another key element to highlight about this charge is it presently does not appear the same way on all customers' bills. This is an issue that we're working to resolve, and we're actually near the tail end of a commission case where it will adjust this so that the appearance of these charges is uniform for both our customers and PG&E's customers, but that still will take some time to implement. So presently, the PCIA appears on our customers' bills on the generation page alongside our generation charges. And that is because these costs in the PCIA are related to generation commitments. It does cut into the amount that we're able to charge our customers for our own generation service. And it is a significant amount, as we'll get into a little later. For the utilities, the PCIA is presently blended into their generation rates. So bundled customers just see a PG&E generation rate, and it's not broken out or delineated by how much of that is due to the PCIA. Another complexity with the PCIA is that the obligations that individual customers have to pay under the PCIA vary based upon when they left the utilities bundled service and joined a CCA. So in our case, the majority of our customers left and joined our service back in 2016. With the addition of Los Banos upcoming, those customers are clearly departing at a much different moment in time. And so they will have a different amount of costs assigned to them under the PCIA than our current San Mateo County customers. For 2021, the PCIA presently represents about 44% of the overall generation charges paid by the average PCE residential customer. So as I mentioned briefly before, this charge has a very significant impact on what we are able to charge our own customers for our own service. And it is a charge that changes year by year and continues to creep upward as the market value declines year over year. And that's mainly the market value for renewables. As there's more and more supply of renewables, the premium paid for renewable energy is diminishing to the point where there's little premium relative to the cost of conventional energy. The PCIA will remain on customers' bills for quite a while as well. At this point, for San Mateo customers, this charge will remain on their bills at least through 2040, because that's when the last of the contracts that PG&E committed to get to expire. And a lot of those early renewable portfolio standard contracts that I mentioned before, they were committed to in 2009 are 25, 30-year contracts. So in closing, I'd say that the PCIA is arguably the most important policy item that we and our fellow CCAs have to deal with. It has the most direct implications on our abilities to operate our own agencies, our abilities to charge our cost of service back to our customers, or as near to our cost of service as we can, back to our customers for our generation service. And because it is cutting so far into the total generation rates that customers otherwise see, if they're PG&E customers, it hinders how much of our generation revenue we are able to allocate to other things that our agency would like to advance, such as our programs, or such as targeted discounts for low-income customers, additional bill relief in response to COVID, and so forth. The next topic I'd like to cover is the Integrated Resources Planning Process, or IRP. This was started with legislation back in 2015, SB 350, and it charges the Public Utilities Commission, CPUC, with overseeing a statewide electricity sector planning process. This is a process that involves modeling what the commission believes the state will need going forward in terms of electricity supply, both in terms of just the amount of electricity that needs to be generated, as well as the capacity that needs to be available to meet demand. So what it takes to reliably operate the grid going forward as we march towards our climate objectives and march to 100% renewable electricity supply. Now, CCAs are required to engage in this process. We are charged with presenting our own integrated resource plans to the CPUC. And we do this every 2 years. And the CPUC takes these integrated resource plans from all load serving entities, so the investor-owned utilities, the electric service providers that serve direct access, and CCAs, mashes them all together, sees how they compare year by year to what they've modeled and what they think that the sector needs at large. And in doing so, they can identify potential shortcomings in the collective, and then it could be shortcomings that are really the responsibility of 1 or 2 entities, or shortcomings that are just systemic, such as too many different entities relying on or planning to procure the same singular resource 2-3 years from now that clearly can't serve all 3 or all 4, and as a result, there's a shortage, there's a need for additional build and new resources. As such, these planning processes often result in procurement as well. And we've seen this now twice. The first IRP cycle to resolve was the 2017-18 plan, and that led to 3,300 megawatts of additional capacity installed over the course of 2021 through 2023. And just recently, the 2019-2020 plan concluded, which has also led to a new ruling considering up to 7,500 megawatts of further capacity to be procured over 2024 through 2026. PCE would be required to procure a certain share of these amounts, not the entirety, but something corresponding more or less with our load share relative to the broader grid. And if we do not act on this, then the commission is in the position to be able to order the utilities to procure resources on our behalf. The last topic I'll go into some depth on is transportation electrification. This one is a bit newer in terms of how much time has transpired at the commission. But this also came about from SB 350, the same legislation that created the IRP. It also charged the commission with establishing a transportation electrification framework for utility programs. And presently, utility-led transportation electrification programs that use ratepayer funds, that include funds from our customers, are evaluated on an ad hoc basis, and there's really no sense of overall spend and what is the appropriate level of overall spend, whether one application to the next is really distinctly different and adding value or is simply being duplicative. So that's the kind of the inspiration for the need for a framework. It's a system level view to make sure that we're firing on all cylinders, so to speak, as we are advancing transportation electrification while using electricity ratepayer funds. The commission is presently contemplating a durable framework, which means it would be more like what we are seeing in energy efficiency these days, where Entities that engage in this process present a 10-year forward plan of what they're going to do in this space, propose a budget that comes with that, and then there are kind of sub-funding cycles, but there's effectively a green light for the next 10 years for each of those entities that are engaged to receive ratepayer funds to deploy these types of programs. And as such, this is an area that I've been looking at quite closely to see if there's an opportunity for our agency to plug in a similar manner with the CPUC to advance transportation electrification goals over a multi-year horizon. PCE has really been a thought leader in this space. There are other CCAs engaged in the case as well, but they really came to the table because PCE came to the table first and started advocating quite, I think, effectively that CCAs have a role to play in this space and add value to the broader ratepayer base by being present in this space. They add a distinctly different type of administrative perspective than the investor-owned utilities because we're public agencies, because we don't have shareholders, we're not driven by increasing more and more distribution grid infrastructure build out. We're really focused on how do we achieve these transportation goals of getting as many ports out there and as widely accessible as possible in a way that is low cost. Low cost for individual customers and low cost for our communities, low cost for the rate pays as a whole. So PCE has argued for the inclusion of CCAs as program administrators, and we believe this will lead to a quicker achievement of states' transportation electrification goals at a much lower cost. We hope to have resolution of this case within the year, and I hope to be bringing some good news to the board later on about the opportunities that come from this. But at this point, it is a bit uncertain where things will land. Lastly, I'll just say this case exemplifies a much more proactive type of engagement before the Public Utilities Commission than we typically see with CCA regulatory affairs. We play a lot of defense. There's not a lot of opportunity for offense, or there's not a lot of opportunity for shaping the narrative and leading the narrative rather than just responding to the narrative. So this is an exceptional case in that regard. I'll go over some brief industry challenges and opportunities as well. So rate uncertainty is arguably the greatest challenge that we face. The PCIA continues to rise. There continues to be a great deal of difficulty in predicting how much it will rise by year over year. And as such, it makes our agency's opportunities to conduct long-term plans. How do we want to devote funding towards programs? How do we want to devote funding towards deeper discounts to areas of our service area, or what have you? Any of that is really challenging to do. Just how do we formulate a year-over-year budget? Because the PCIA can move so much from one year to the next and has such a significant impact on then our revenues for that year. We're also facing what I'd like to call a compounding of industry crises. Climate change is causing all sorts of impacts to the electricity industry, including impacts on reliability. Increased heat during the summertime caused outages last year. We are already seeing that we're going into a severe drought year this year, so there will be far less hydroelectric supply later in the year, which means we'll depend more and more on other generating facilities than hydro. And so we may end up with another summer where there's a very tight amount of supply relative to the amount of demand as everyone turns their AC on and everyone's working from home. So we'll see. The reliability continues to be a hot button issue and a very timely issue. And even just the example of what happened in Texas earlier this year is another example of how climate change is really cutting to the core of reliability concerns within the utility sector. A offshoot of that are these public safety power shutoffs, which are also impacting the reliability of service, but are being done for artificial reasons. They're being done to limit the potential wildfire damage caused by sparks from the electricity infrastructure during extreme weather conditions. They also are there to shield the utility shareholders from potential liabilities from those events. And so we are continuing to do more and more in this space to try to protect our customers from the reality that the reliability of our electricity supply is diminishing and will likely stay in a somewhat diminished state until we can get to a more reliable, not just supply, but reliable infrastructure to deliver electricity throughout the state. There's also just growing industry complexities as we transition to a cleaner supply. We're going from conventional resources that have been well known and well studied for decades to new emerging technologies that may generate electricity in intermittent patterns versus technologies that can store power but don't generate it themselves. And all that just takes a new view on the industry and a new approach. And then because of all these changes, because of all this concern about reliability, and all these wildfire liabilities that have been piling up, and also the state's various climate objectives promoting additional ratepayer spend, affordability is becoming a growing concern. The cost of electricity is going up in the state. It's already high. California's cost of electricity is higher than most states. And as it becomes more and more expensive, it makes it more and more difficult to encourage people to use more electricity in place of gasoline or in place of natural gas, which are core to our programmatic objectives and core to addressing climate change. So there's tensions there as well. And some opportunities I see are that individuals' relationships with the electricity sector are changing. People are becoming more engaged, whether it's directly or through adopting technologies that automate their engagement. People are starting to look at electricity a little differently now, that they can't just assume it'll always be there and it'll always be on. And certainly as they're seeing it as an alternative to their old gas car and such, their perspectives are changing. And technologies continue to evolve rapidly. So it is difficult to predict what will come, but there's a lot of opportunity that comes with all of that innovation as well. And lastly, a brief overview of our relationship with the board. We often meet with key decision makers, the leadership at these various state agencies, and there are opportunities for our members of our board to participate in those meetings. It's often good to have elected officials alongside other elected officials to get our messages across. We also reach out to the board from time to time to deliberate over strategy and to seek advisement on key issue areas. We also present to the board frequently to further educate you about the many complexities of this industry. And then we do provide our monthly board memos and updates, and we occasionally do need to turn to the board for contracts, for legal and technical support to aid us in all that our team does. Thank you for your time.